phone as well as on my wristwatch, so I am going to call this meeting to order at 4 o'clock. This is the Cape Cod Gateway Airport Commission meeting scheduled for Tuesday, December 19th, 2023. We are holding this meeting in the airport conference room at 4 o'clock. And the meeting will be televised via Xfinity Channel 8 or High Definition Channel 1072. It may also be accessed via the Government Access Channel live stream on the Town of Barnstable website. With all of that being said, I don't see anyone in our audience, but if there is anyone, I don't have the exact language but in front of me, but if there is anyone recording this above and beyond our local cable television station, please announce yourself. Not hearing anyone, we shall move on to a roll call. Mary, would you be so kind as to do our official roll call?
Commissioner Flores?
Here.
Commissioner DeGeorge?
Here.
Commissioner Bailey?
Here.
Commissioner Earwell?
Here.
Thank you. Okay, we have a majority of the members here, so this is a legitimate meeting. And the next item on the agenda is to please rise and do the pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you all. Next item on the agenda are the minutes of previous meetings, in this case, November 28th, 2023. I hope everyone has had the opportunity to look at the minutes. Are there any additions, deletions, changes, any suggestions?
I thought that Mark made a point that he arrived late and they needed to be amended too. Was that
I think you are correct. Speaking of Mark, he's here now.
I don't know if Sue has amended that yet, but we can hold off until next month.
Then let us hold off on approving the November 28th meetings until the next meeting, and let me make note that Commissioner Mark Guillard has joined us at a little bit after 4 o'clock. And we will go into public comments, item number 4 on the agenda, and not seeing anyone from the public. I guess we can move right on to item number 6, which is the Commissioner's response to the public comment. Obviously, not having anyone here to speak, there's no reason for us to respond accordingly. So we can jump right into item number 7, which is the report from the subcommittees. I'm going to ask Commissioner Bailey if he would just give a quick update on what happened at the Finance Committee meeting, seeing that Norm Will, our chairperson of that committee, is absent today.
I don't have the minutes of what happened at the meeting.
Okay, then.
Sorry, I was just making sure Mark had a packet.
There should be the sticky note. That
Okay.
was right in front of you.
I don't have a
Sorry.
full packet.
That's what I'm asking.
Yeah,
if he
I
has a
just
full
have the
packet.
agenda.
Okay, the fact that Commissioner Weil is not here, who normally gives the report on the Finance Committee meetings, we will suspend that for today, and I will ask Katie, when we get into the actual new business of the day, to give us an explanation of what the Finance Committee actually sent forward to the full committee. All of the items, all of the motions on the agenda today were initially approved by the subcommittee of the Finance Committee at its last meeting. So with that being said, we'll move on to the report of the Infrastructure and Marketing Committee. Commissioner Beal, excuse me, Joe, you're in charge of that committee. Commissioner DeGeorge, would you be so kind as to report that out for us?
We did not meet. We did not have a subcommittee meeting for the month of December. We will have our next one in January.
Okay. With that being said, we'll move on to item number 8, which is old business, and not seeing any old business to review, we will move right on to item number 9, which is new business. The first item being COM 1223-1. I'm going to ask Commissioner Bailey if he would read that into the meeting minutes.
COM 1223-1, motion to approve fiscal year 2025-2029 Airport Capital Improvement Plan for submittal to the Town of Barnstable Responsible Finance Committee may be acted upon.
And do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a first and a second. Now for discussion, I'm gonna ask Manager Service to give us the review of item 1223-1.
Sure, thank you. So really just some background about how the process starts when we start developing this each year. It starts with airport management drafting an internal list of capital projects for its capital improvement plan, also known as the CIP. It's typically based on previous year's submissions with changes needed for various airport master plan projects that were identified as part of the overall master plan update in May of 2022. And then, which is also subject to our current ongoing environmental assessment, which should be wrapped up in 2024. But the plan is kind of a rolling plan. It's based on our communications with both the Federal Aviation Administration and MassDOT Aeronautics as to what is actually included in that plan. So after our internal discussions with the airport team, requests for updated cost estimates were made to our on-call teams. So we reached out to Airport Solutions Group and Horsley Witten Group to provide us with any updated estimates to the projects that were listed. A draft CIP is then sent to the Federal Aviation Administration and the Massachusetts Department of Transportation for review prior to our annual meeting with both of those agencies. So the meeting was held with MassDOT and FAA on in October and November of 2023 to discuss the airport's proposed capital improvement plan. Because the vast majority of funding is coming from both those state and federal agencies, those entities will make modifications as necessary within our plan. And suggestions by the federal and state planners present during that meeting identified how Cape Cod Gateway Airport projects would adequately fit within the 5-year horizon for both federal and state programs. So obviously, we're one of 35 public use airports in Massachusetts, but the FAA also handles all of the airports within New England. So we have to see where we fit and where our project fits for various years. So typically, the airport receives an annual allocation of anywhere from $1 million to $1.2 million under the Airport Improvement Program. And again, that's based on appropriations from the federal government. Other grants are also available and includes the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law Grant, which is anywhere from about $1 to $1.2 million annually for the next 5 years, but that can vary as well. A number of the projects were funded under the Airport Improvement Program, and we also identified projects that we would request funding under the bill grants. And then there are some projects that are 100% airport funded. We'll seek grants if we can, but there are some projects that at this point in time, FAA or MassDOT Aeronautics did not commit to. So because several projects do need discretionary funding, including some of the taxiway projects that we're proceeding forward with, the FAA moved those projects out to various fiscal years due to their other obligations that they have within the region. Like I said, airport management worked with our on-call engineering team and Horsley Witten Group for environmental to get updated estimates for the projects. We focus on fiscal year 2025. They do an update for 2026, fiscal year 2026 and beyond by just providing some various multipliers to that. But they really try to drill into the exact dollar amounts that they think a project would move forward on for the initial fiscal year. So in your packets, you received an Excel spreadsheet that has identified the projects, and then you also have in text the projects for fiscal year 2025 further explained and defined. So in fiscal year 2025, 5 projects were brought forward at an estimated cost of just over $5 million, with the local share at about $1.6 million. So let me go over those projects with you. Upgrades to the tower HVAC system. This project is eligible for grant funding through the bill grant. FAA has indicated that we should seek fiscal year 2022 bill grant monies to use and fiscal year 2023. Note that the federal government is on a different fiscal year than us. That's why in the left-hand corner you have the calendar year, the local and state fiscal year are 2025, and the FAA's fiscal year is 2024. So it makes it a little bit confusing, but it makes it easier for us to identify it in this manner. So this particular project, the overall cost is just over $2 million. Right now, scope of work has been reviewed a few times by our staff, by Chris and Matt have reviewed the scope of work for this project. The fees that are associated with this for a local funding share is just over $104,000 for this project. The project itself, the building was put in 2011. The HVAC units have failed. In fact, we have had temporary units up in the tower crab to keep them either cold or warm, depending on the season. So this will be a complete fix to that system. The system failure has to do with the fact that we're in a salt air environment. The units that were put in were not put into the specifications in terms of being in a salt air environment, so that has showed some failures. And Matt, were there any other failures that I forgot to mention?
No, just that it's exacerbated because even though it was designed with 3.5 units to be redundant, it's all plumbed together through one central point. So if any part of that fails, the whole system fails. So any fix has to be immediate, which is difficult with lead times of parts given the supply chain issues we've experienced since COVID.
Katie, what are the working hours of the tower again?
So they are from 6 to 10,
6 a.m. to 10 p.m.
yes. And we like our controllers to be nicely heated and cooled.
Oh, no.
I haven't spent a lot of time in control towers. It can get pretty hot up there, even with air conditioning working, because of the greenhouse effect of those windows.
Sure.
And there are colored shades that you can pull down that mitigate some of the effect. My question though is, this is $2 million for HVAC system for a relatively small building. I'm just wondering what is going to be involved in that would cost $2 million.
So we're looking at the scope of work right now. It's probably going to come in less than the $2 million. This is what we have under the Bill Act as well. I believe right now the estimate is about 150,000. Excuse me, 1,500,000 is a rough estimate right now for the scope of work.
And I can speak to
Yep,
that.
if you
Sure.
could.
And so it's a complete replacement of the full HVAC system.
Sure.
So, and like you know, we can't just remove everything at once. We have to do it phased.
Yeah.
We'll be installing a redundant system for the cab itself. It'll be used by mini splits.
Uh-huh.
So that'll go in first to allow us to do the work in the building. And now we're going to go from the type of system there is now to a water-based heat pump system with a cooling tower. So it's full new system put in a different style system. Hopefully we can reuse some of the ductwork that's there, but we might have to replace that as well. So it is, it's very impactful, and it's the full building from the ground floor all the way up to the cap. So there's a lot of space to it.
Is every floor of that tower occupied, finished as a room? As
Yes,
an
sir, it
office?
is.
Okay.
Yeah, either an office space or a break
Yeah.
room
Yeah,
or an
training
IT
room.
room, radio
Yeah,
room.
yeah,
Yes, sir.
tape room, all that stuff. Okay, and then, is there something that's gonna go on the roof?
There will be part of that mini split system. There'll be some components up there to help cool the cab separate. This will be two separate systems for the cab itself.
In the cooling tower?
The cooling tower will not go there, it'll go on the
Okay.
ground floor.
Okay,
Offset to hopefully not impact any view, obviously, of the controllers.
right, okay, all right, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thanks, Chris. Any other questions on that item before I move on to the next project in the fiscal year 2025 CIP? Okay. Permitting for the airport master plan projects, short-term projects. So we're in the middle of our environmental assessment. We're working through that right now. But the next step after we get our final decision from the federal government and from the state is to move forward with permitting for these projects. So when it says short-term projects, it includes taxiway redevelopment of taxiway Bravo, taxiway Delta and Echo. It includes the runway extension project. So the vast majority of projects that were identified within our master plan are included in this permitting aspect. The only thing that's not included, because it was considered to be much longer term, is any further build out of the terminal. And when I mean build out of the terminal, it's adding to the wings of the terminal building. That was not included, nor was the EMAS bed for the approach end, at the approach end of runway 24. So those are considered longer term projects. Our permits probably won't last until that point in time when we actually go to develop those projects, so that's why they're left off. So Horsley Witten Group provided this estimate for us back in 2020, and then we increased it going into this fiscal year for the permits that would be needed. Obviously, we're not through with the environmental assessment yet, but this is standard for the projects that we're looking at. The share is funded by the FAA, the state, and the local match being 5% at just over $26,250 for this project. Any questions or comments on this item? Okay. Moving on, the next project that we have in our fiscal year 2025
Thank you.
is to replace snow removal equipment. We have some large pieces of snow removal equipment that are eligible for replacement under the FAA's program. We have a certain number of pieces of snow equipment that we can have on hand that the FAA approves to allow us to clear the snow from the primary surfaces during a snowstorm. This is one such piece of equipment. It's Airport 47. It's a 2006 vehicle that has a 24-foot blade on it, plow. Is this the one with the sander as well?
Yeah.
And a sander. So the estimates that we received were in August of 2023 from Airport Solutions Group. $383,000 is the overall estimate for that replacement of that piece of equipment, with a 5% match by state and local, and then the FAA with 90%. Our match is just over $19,000 for that piece of equipment.
Okay,
Yes.
not that I've been shopping for trucks lately, but at $383,000 for the vehicle. Now, the picture that was attached to it is looks like a pretty standard vehicle that you see out there with highway departments plowing roads. Just kind of surprised at the price tag.
Yeah, I am not, to be honest with you. I'm trying to get to that picture so I can show.
I mean, I've been involved in the acquisition of airport fire equipment that is up in this price range, which are very specialized vehicles.
Yeah.
But this is a big truck with a plow and a sander.
Yep, that is pretty much the going rate for that piece of equipment. Shockingly so,
Seriously,
yeah. Yep.
I'm in the wrong business.
Glad you don't need that for the house.
Yeah, right?
I don't know if FAA Made in America also adds to that price tag. There are certain elements that it has to be made in the United States.
Sure.
So there are certain elements of that creep into that as well, but that is pretty much the going rate for a truck like this.
I just hope we have someone to drive it.
We do, we do.
Thank
Any
you.
other questions on that item?
Oh, yeah, I had one other question too.
Yep.
I was looking at the details of it, and we're talking about 3 months for design and permitting. Isn't this pretty much COTS? Like, these are trucks that are already made for this kind of stuff? We have to design it?
So we have to put at least some specifications together to say what we're looking for to meet FAA criteria. So there are some specifications that we have to develop for it. So it'll take our Airport Solutions Group a little time to do that. It might not take 3 months, but roughly it could take that. For the time to get that piece of equipment in, it really depends on whether or not they have it in stock or have to build that piece of equipment. So we have construction 6 to 12 months, because we actually, last year, we were in a situation where we just wanted to buy a truck.
Yeah.
And we couldn't get it in a 12-month time frame. And that was just a truck that was off the lot.
Have the specifications changed since 2006? Because
yes.
I'm thinking if not, and we're doing a 1-for-1 replacement, we can use the specifications that we use.
No, they've modified. The
Have they?
FAA has updated their front-end specifications and what they need
Okay.
for equipment. So typically, I'm sure our team will probably pull something that they've used at another airport and provide the same data that we need for our particular piece of equipment. But I put a little buffer in there of 3 months just to give them time to be able to do that.
Okay.
Unlike the private sector, I think those of us who have worked in local, state, and federal government, usually this represents the height of bureaucracy when you try to get something done that normally you would think takes a lesser amount of time for a lesser amount of money.
Yeah.
We have built-in protection against that.
Yeah, no, I agree, it does take some time. I don't know if Matt or Chris have anything to add to that particular item. I know, Matt, you've been a little bit closer to the equipment purchases in the past.
No, I think we summarized it. For the snowplow, the design work, there is actually a computation that's based on the amount of surface that you have, the rate that goes in, and each time you purchase a new piece of equipment, there's a certain amount of plow footage that is able to be supported by FAA grants. So that process takes some time and research on the engineer's part, working with our FAA engineer to go through that process.
The plow footage, you're talking about
The width
size of the plow, right, but I mean, FAA isn't like sitting there waiting for the phone to ring and somebody says, hey, what's the design spec for a snow plow at a, this size airport? I don't know, let me jot some numbers around. They have a policy, they have a procedure, this is already determined.
It's a computation that you
Right.
go through, and then you have to basically send in for their review to make sure they agree with your finding.
Yeah.
But it's all published in an advisory circular.
Right.
It just takes time to go through that and then wait for the response to come back from them.
Okay. All right. If you're comfortable with the timeline I am, I just
Yeah.
thought that was a little bit extraordinary for what I thought was, you call up the local International Harvester dealership and say, hey, you need a $10 million
Private
plow and
sector, you
sand.
can do that.
But there I go simplifying things.
Unfortunately, it's a little bit more involved.
As long as it happens during that term as commissioners.
They don't have one in the law.
Yeah, it will,
I'll be happy.
it will.
All right, thank you.
Thanks, Matt. Terminal optimization program, is the next item on the list. Now, this estimate here is just an estimate at $1,500,000. And the reason why we have that in there is because we just don't know until we put out a RFP and scope of work to get this work done. And the reason why we're looking at a terminal optimization program is during COVID, when we had JetBlue here and we had to keep our passengers socially distanced, we did not have enough room in our TSA screening checkpoint to be able to do that. So we had to form 3 lines of pre-check-in so that people can socially distance themselves and get into the screening checkpoint and waiting at the gate to load onto the aircraft. So now we have American Airlines coming in. You know what our summers look like. Sometimes there's fog, there's instances where we get cancellations. So there is a potential that we can have multiple aircraft waiting to board in that TSA screening checkpoint at the same time. So in looking at that, when we did the airport master plan, we looked at options to modify the footprint of the existing building, utilize some of the cafe space, which is not being utilized right now, utilize some of the cafe space in enlarging the TSA checkpoint, screening area and the 2 gates that are there, allowing for at least 200 passengers to be in that gate at any one time. But we want to look at that and make sure that makes sense, and we also want to be mindful that if we need to expand in the future beyond the life of the master plan, if we start looking at expanding on the wings, such as on this side, on the other side of the terminal, that we're doing in a way that allows for that expansion without, putting in a lot of money to do this upgrade and to change the interior space of this building, that won't work in the future. So we just want to have a clear vision of what that might potentially look like so that we have options to review for renovations of the existing structure and then moving forward in the future. So the best way to do that is as a planning program to see how can we do this in the terminal building.
So Kate, are you suggesting that what was once the coffee shop, we have suspended our search for a lessee in the event that we have to restructure that area?
We
Is
haven't.
that off the table?
It's not off the table, but that would be the best use of space on that side of the terminal building to expand TSA. We all know that the restaurant probably should not be on the back side of the terminal building. It should be where they could see the airfield. So it really should be in a different location. I think we have to look at that as part of this terminal optimization plan. What would we do with, could we carve out a little cafe at some other location over here near gate 1? Carve it out from this existing space here. So we have to look at other ways to do that. But the best way to do that is say, what are our needs? How can we do it within our existing footprint with knowing that in the future we may expand?
So we have no one at present showing any interest in
No.
renting that.
But I would agree with you, Katie, that, you know, having it airfield facing is a draw, is an attraction.
Totally.
There's a lot of airports that get a lot of traffic because GA
Nantucket.
pilots will fly
Nantucket
in,
for one.
you know, they have a nice lunch, they come out at the airport, and even ground traffic, people in the local area, it's kind of nice to go and have a bite to eat, especially at night, if we ever get that lucky to have something that would be open at night, and seeing the airfield lights.
Yeah. We've talked to some people about having more of a kiosk here instead, just for the time being. So
Sure.
there is some type of sandwiches and coffee and
Yep.
drinks that they could have, where it's on a smaller version until we can build something that is actually looking over the airfield in an attraction for people to come to.
Sure.
No, I think the issue of moving that location, if we are ever to have a coffee shop or a restaurant facing the airfield itself. I remember when we redid this and it opened up, there was criticism immediately that, why do we have a restaurant looking at the parking lot?
Right.
It just made no sense.
Yeah.
So, shame on whoever the architect was.
Yeah.
Whoever the designer was.
Yeah, I think we need to come up with something better, and if we're talking about future renovation, you know, there has been discussion about going up a second level where you can actually have a jetway.
That'd be perfect.
If we were to do that, then there'd be enough visual opportunity to see the airfield from a second floor. So we would need architects to take a look at that to make sure that these wings can support a second story.
Maybe an observation deck as well.
Okay.
And moving on to our last item for 2025 is electric aircraft charging station for facilities. So in October of 2023, we updated these estimates. These estimates were based on national laboratory results when they started writing a white paper of what it would cost to put in electric charging stations for aircraft. And depending on the type of charging station you put in, whether it's a DC fast charger or a slow trickle charger, whatever you end up putting in, they provided a cost estimate for that. So we know that electric aviation is coming, it's here. Mastar Aeronautics already has their Pipistrel aircraft, it's a two-place electric aircraft that they're using right now. If you go up to Burlington, Vermont, you can see Beta's Alia aircraft that is identified as experimental, but they are flying it. We do have Beta coming to the airport to install electric charging station on their own dime over on the east ramp. But not knowing whether or not we would have another facility or another entity like Beta to be able to install something at the terminal building, we have to be ready to be able to do that. Hopefully there'll be incentives for us to be able to do that, some grant funding capabilities. In speaking to the FAA, there is a piece of money that's in the airport improvement program that is catered towards green technologies. So we could possibly tap into that to install these units here. The $550,000 estimate is for 2 DC fast chargers on either side of the terminal with multiple ports to allow for charging of multiple aircraft at any one time. We don't have the design yet, but we really have to be forward thinking and start thinking about putting something like this in near the terminal, even if it's just one that we install initially. I think that it's inevitable that this is going to become, and we need to be ready for these aircraft that are going to be operating. In speaking to Cape Air and speaking to Southern Airways Express with a hybrid aircraft that we're looking at, and Cape Air, of course, is looking at all electric to operate from here to the islands as well. I'm not sure of their time frame. The time frame has changed a little bit based on who is going to get certified, which company will get their aircraft certified. But I think within the time period of this capital improvement plan, we're going to see a need for some type of charging station. Any questions on that?
Do we have vehicle charging stations here in the airport now?
We do.
We do.
So Atlantic Aviation has several charging stations at their site.
Mhm.
Cape Air in their parking lot next to the fuel farm, and at their building where they have their fleet building, they have charging stations there as well. We are part of a program with the town of Barnstable to install at least 5 charging stations here at the airport. So we have the risk management team and the green technologies team over at the town are looking into that for us, so, which is great. And that would be under the state program. There might be some upfront cost, but they would be minimal in comparison to what we would have to pay for the full installation.
Are they rapid chargers? For the
They are not rapid recharge stations. They're the level 2, I believe.
Yeah. I was wondering maybe if we could wrap an upgrade in for those. I had the pleasure of renting an electric vehicle without realizing I was renting an electric vehicle. Until I was on the highway and I'm trying to figure out where the gas gauge is, and all I can see is this battery there, and I said it was a BMW too, so it's like, I just
All
did not
electric.
think. Yeah, all electric.
Yeah.
And as it turned out, you know, it was one of those quick turnarounds. I came down from Boston to the Cape. I had to get the car back to Logan Airport. I'm racing back to Logan Airport, and I didn't have time to stop at the charging station.
Mhm.
So I figured, well, I'll stop by, Weymouth just before I got on the expressway, and I'll charge it there. And the nice thing is, that technology says, here are all your charging stations. So it was one right off the highway, swung off, pulled up, put my credit card in, plugged in, got back on the car with the dashboard, and this was like about 2:30, 3 o'clock in the afternoon. It said 100% charge, 4 a.m.
4 a.m.
So, needless to say, I could not wait that long, and I left without charging it, and I got to the airport with 12 miles to spare in the battery.
Wow.
Fingers crossed.
If we have an
If we can
opportunity
do
to,
rapid recharge, you're saying do
Yeah.
it? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, the 550,000 accounts for rapid recharge.
okay, good.
Okay.
Katie, speaking of charging, I was talking with a couple of folks who do the car rental. They're also looking at wanting to install somewhere down the road electrical charging stations, because they want to bring
Yes.
more electric cars, so I'm sure that they'll be reaching out to you
Yeah.
to have that discussion.
Yeah, I've
Maybe there's some
spoken,
way we can piggyback whatever it is that we're doing with them also.
I've spoken to all companies, they're all interested in putting charging stations. Most of them are interested in putting them at their wash racks,
Mhm.
not necessarily in this parking lot here. So they're looking at, like maybe 4 plug-in units, 2 to 4 plug-in units per company is what they're looking at. They would install them on their own. The airport, I don't think, because they would be used for a private company, I don't think
Right.
we can install them and get the incentives,
Right.
but they can install them and get their own incentives. But we should think about what we wanna do in terms of a lease, because they're going to be putting in all of the work to put that infrastructure in.
But it's our property that they have.
That's correct.
Something has to be figured out there.
Yep.
Okay, one other question before you move on. All of these in the blue are those that were suspended in '24, now moving into '25.
Yeah.
Have we had discussions with the finance director, Mark Milne, on these, or are these strictly still proposals? These haven't been approved, these are just moving
Right, so
forward down.
these are proposals to bring that,
Yes.
to bring to you.
Right.
The next step is that we go to the town.
Yeah.
In fact, they've scheduled their meeting with me for January 9th to talk to the finance director and the town manager, and then after that, it goes to town council for
Right.
approval. So it still has a few steps, but my next meeting is January with the town manager. All right, that's what we have for 2025, so the total projects is just over 5 million. The local share of those projects is about 1.6 million roughly, which we would take from our reserves to cover the local share.
Just an overall comment, when you set these spreadsheets up, can you just keep an eye on the cell placement? Some of these had the
Got cut
text
off.
centered in the cell and the top line is cut off.
Sure.
Just- Yeah, thank
Yep.
you,
No problem.
Right there.
exactly. Well, that's not bad, you can read that, just look at this. Can't read that at all.
Moving into 2026, we have one project with an estimated cost of 80,000. The local share would be 16,000 for this. It's to replace another piece of SRE equipment for Airport 32. It's a 2001 piece of equipment that we want to replace. And I am gonna turn this over to Matt if he has any further additions to add to this conversation about that Chevy truck that we wanna replace.
This would be similar to what you would picture as like a personal pickup truck, a larger size, obviously, and with the plow, so it would just be a plow and a truck. We operate a fleet of these, probably 6 or 7, and these go through the state contract program that Chris works through to procure those. Usually the lead time is shorter, but this, Katie mentioned the example before. We tried to purchase one of these with a state grant. Our deadline for all state grants is June 30th each year, and it's always a rush to finish, so we purchased one, and even though it's simply buying a truck, and we do have to paint it Wheatland yellow, that special yellow takes a little while, but it's always a rush to get that, even when we're buying just off the lot.
Thank you, Matt.
Just, are these gonna have plows on them?
Yes.
We could buy 5 of these for the cost of that one other truck if you want to sit up Congo line.
We could, but we'd need more people, so we'd be
Yeah.
coming back and asking for that.
They might not wanna come in.
I think you've been talking to somebody.
Careful.
Moving on to our fiscal year 2027, this is where we start looking at the projects that were part of the airport master plan and moving those forward. These are larger projects that will take discretionary funding and to enable us to do those projects. So the first one is to design, construct, and relocate taxiway Bravo. That was identified in the master plan as being one of the oldest pieces of pavements that we need to fix. That will be priority number 1 for us for the master plan taxiway projects that we're going to implement. The estimate came in this past October at $8.8 million to reconstruct that. That's also moving that taxiway. So it allows us to move it closer to runway 624, which allows us to provide for more apron space if we need it in the future. So we're just making sure that we have those standards in place. So that is the first project where we'll be seeking discretionary money for from the FAA.
And I would suggest that this being planned for fiscal year 27, that 8.8 is now a current estimate. You probably add 10 to 15%
You
to
probably
that by
will.
the time it reaches fruition.
You probably will. As you get beyond the fiscal year that will be requested.
Yeah, I'm only really focused on 25.
Yeah.
That's all that really matters to me.
Exactly, because
The rest
that-
is all what-ifs.
Right, so those will be updated. I think at one, if I go back to the CIP previously, that was a lesser amount
Right.
during a previous CIP.
Yeah, the rest are all really wishful thinking
Yes.
at this point.
That would also have a 90% matching share from the FAA, 5% from the state, and 5% locally. Moving on to the next project is upgrades, phase 1 for the TSA hold room expansion.
That has a line above it.
Yeah, that's, let me go to this. Give me 2 seconds.
Good, I didn't see that.
I just have to pull that up.
This is the PDF, right?
Yeah, that's the
Yeah.
PDF. I just
Okay.
wanna see if I have it here. And of course, it's not doing it as quickly as I want it to.
Well, it's
I'll tell you-
FY27, there's plenty of time to figure it out.
I believe that's the
It is.
terminal optimization project upgrades.
Is that what it says? What do you think?
There's a G,
I'm pulling
lowercase g
it
in
up.
that first word. so-
Talk amongst
It's not
yourselves.
terminal. Or optimization.
This Wheel of Fortune or what?
You're
By a
gonna
vowel.
be an English teacher.
Yeah, I'd love for my English teachers to hear you say that.
I started out as one.
Did you really? God bless you.
That says, design and construct terminal upgrades, phase 1.
Design.
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 I guess
Design.
that's the grades phase.
Sorry.
Okay. All
About
right, great,
that.
thank you.
Yes. So obviously, that would look at the projects that come out of the optimization program. So we have a dollar amount in there at 6.5. It really depends on what we do. So these numbers are, that project estimate, that was based on what we just did for a renovation down at the FBO, at our fixed base operation. we know that the space that we're talking about is much bigger. So we know that those estimates will be increased depending on what we decide to do. Moving on to the next project is another piece of snow removal equipment. This is a skid steer plow that we use for the EMAS bed, but we also use it during snowstorms. It's very helpful in clearing snow around our sign systems. We've used it on sidewalks as well, so it's a pretty versatile piece of equipment that we use constantly. And it's this little like plow. I don't even know how half of our people can get into it. It's like this little thing, but it works very well.
Like a sidewalk plow?
Basically, it's like a very small bobcat type of thing. And because of its size, it's designed so that it can go onto the EMAS, which is a crushable concrete, although we really try and avoid that at all costs. But it's able to maneuver out front in between all of the poles and posts. And we also use it during the summer. We have mowing deck attachments for certain times, so we can repurpose it. We have a bucket, so it can be used for other projects, but its primary purpose is for snow removal on the EMAS in a severe situation.
I'm just curious why we would need to remove snow from the EMAS, because if anything, I would imagine that snow would increase the mitigation effect of the EMAS.
I like the way you think, Mark. Yes, the only time we generally always try to avoid it because we don't want to damage the crushable concrete. Because of where the localizer antenna for runway 24 is located at the 6 approach end, it's very short because we have a non-standard safety area, thus the EMAS. So there can be, if there are certain depths, there can be interference with the nav signal.
Radiation, affecting the radiation of the localizer antenna.
Right.
Got it, okay, yep.
Any questions on 2027? Any additional questions? Moving on to 2028. This does say design and construct. Reconstruction and realignment of taxiway Delta and Echo. I'm going to bring up a Google because it might be a little bit easier just to show you where I'm talking about. So the previous project that I was talking about, Taxiway Bravo, I'm just going to point it out since I'm on here now. This is Taxiway Bravo, right here. This taxiway, you can kind of see this right here, the scoring right here in the grass. That's about the location that the taxiway would be moved to. It allows us to provide for a larger apron area here for us, as well as for hangar development. Why it was put there, it was built long ago when the military was here as well. The pavement is 1956. Do I have that right?
It's close to that.
Okay. So that would be the Taxiway Bravo, the previous one I talked about. Taxiway Delta Echo. This is Taxiway Delta. This was at one point in time a runway. The FAA does not want to see a taxiway that enters the runway environment at this angle.
Right,
They want to see
right.
it at 90 degrees.
Yeah, yeah.
So that, just like you're at a stop sign, you want to be able to see both sides before you pull out. Same thing with the aircraft. So taxiway Delta would be redesigned for this area here. And then this taxiway Echo is the taxiway that leads down into the noise buffer zone. So this is, it goes down at declines into this area. And around this area is a built-up tree and earthen berm to muffle the noise from the aircraft. So it's a taxiway that goes essentially nowhere. It's limited to certain type of aircraft, so the Cessna 402 can go down there. You can get a King Air down there as well. Is that right?
The Tecnam and a Twin
The
Otter.
Tecnam. So this taxiway, when it gets redesigned, it's basically going to be a new taxiway Delta that's connected to taxiway Charlie here. This will no longer be in place, but will create a noise berm at the new parallel design for Delta and Echo that will be in place. So that's what that project is entailing. It's redeveloping what's here that does not meet an FAA standard. And that was in the airport's master plan.
Do we, in our, airport, safety risk management plan, do we have hotspots that have been identified that involve any of those intersections?
We have
We
no
have- we have no
hotspots.
We have no hotspots?
No.
Okay, good,
Yeah.
okay, so it's nothing urgent then?
No, I mean, it's nothing that I mean, that would be priority number one if it
Right,
was.
right.
So obviously, the FAA has reviewed, our engineers have reviewed the overall master plan thought process for the design. And I'm sure as we get into full design, they'll review it
Sure.
even more.
The distance between the new location of Bravo and the edge of the runway, ballpark, do you know what that is?
Is 100 and, is it 100 or 200 feet, Matt? From
It would match what alpha is right there.
Okay.
Because that is the standard.
Okay,
Charlie,
all right.
Right.
Yeah, we don't have any issues, okay, all right. I was just thinking about wingtip clearance, but you wouldn't have any problem with that at all.
We do have it now
Where?
in this section here because of this building,
Oh,
right?
We fixed that one,
Oh, sorry,
Yep.
this one.
right? So from the end of the east ramp going up to that elbow, there's a wingtip restriction right now.
oh, really, okay, so that'll mitigate that,
Exactly.
good, okay, good.
We did a wingtip restriction when
Sorry,
we
yeah.
renovated the FBO. And prior to that, that taxiway was actually closer to the building. So the wingtip restriction was all of Bravo. The first step was the shift, and that got rid of the permanent wingtip restriction. And then when we did the renovations, we had to take some of the safety areas, so we did a temporary wingtip restriction.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep. So this requires discretionary funding as well for this project. So as you can imagine, getting discretionary money, sometimes we have to push those projects to different points in time. So right now, we have this in our fiscal year 2028, federal fiscal year 2027. That could change depending on what they have that requires discretionary funding for other airports. Right now, this is where they've placed it for us. Then the next project in 2028 is phase one of the design and acquisition of easements. Phase one, the FAA asked us to split these projects in two phases. We have a number of properties that are off the approach ends of our runways that do not have easements today, existing. Roughly, that's about $10 million of the existing easements that we need to meet our requirements within the runway protection zone. So when I'll go back to the graphic here. So when you're looking at the approach end of runway 15, we do have a number of easements and properties that are located off of Independence, but we don't have all of them for the existing scenario. Same thing going to the approach end of runway 33 and all ends of our runways. So in the master plan, they identified where we do not have easements, where easements will be required. So this plan identifies that first stage of easements for existing, as well as if we extend that runway, the additional that would be needed to extend the runway, which is a much smaller amount, but there's still abrogation easements that we would seek. It's a hefty price because we have to survey, we have to obviously pay the owners for those rights for the property. We have to get it deeded, go through the registry of deeds to get that deeded as well. So it's quite involved for those projects. And it includes all 4 of our runway ends. So that's split into 2. So you'll see it go into fiscal year 2029 where we have phase 2 that's been identified.
That's
As well.
5 years from now,
Yep. Okay.
for the sake of time.
Okay, and then the last 2 projects are snow removal equipment and then adding an additional Jet A tank to our fuel farm.
Snow removal equipment, we just bought a $383,000 truck.
That was 5 years ago.
So, with that being said, those are our totals for our 5-year CIP. My request is that the commission approve it, and I will bring this forward to the town manager and the finance director, as well as to town council.
Okay, with that being said, item COM 1222-3-1 has been read into the meeting minutes. It has been seconded. Katie has given us a good review with a great Q&A back and forth. Thank you, fellow commissioners, for delving into that. And so I would ask at this point, if there aren't any other questions from anyone on the commission, that we take a vote on this. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That is a vote.
Thank you.
And our compliments to you and your team. Very thorough look ahead,
Thank
you
you.
know.
Good job. Okay, moving on to item COM 1223-2, approval of the lease subordination. Let me ask Commissioner DeGeorge to read that into the meeting minutes, please.
Okay, COM 1223-2, motion to approve the lease subordination, disturbance recognition and atonement agreement by and through Cape Cod Gateway Airport Commission and Boston Bread LLC, aka Panera Bread, sublessor of WS Development.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Okay, having a first and a second, we now have to have a discussion on this. Katie, could you expand on it, please?
Sure, so
What was your service? Thank you.
WS Development has finalized their lease with Boston Bread Company, otherwise known as Panera Bread, and they are now required to deliver to Boston Bread a recognition agreement from the Airport Commission. We're leasing to WS Development. WS Development and Boston Bread have negotiated some of the terms that differ from the form of recognition agreement that was initially approved by the Commission back in 2018. Their changes were very minor, to be honest with you, in comparison to what we've seen for other entities that have entered into agreements with WS Development. You'll see this from time to time as we get new retail, lessors, sublessors into the retail plaza. So like I said, a minor redline version of the agreement was approved by our attorney. They reviewed that on our behalf, Anderson and Krieger. They worked through any issues that were there between the two parties, and what was provided to you is the final version that our attorneys had approved and reviewed. The document recognizes the lease between Boston Bread and WS Development and further stipulates that it is a ground lease between the airport and WS Development. So if that were to ever sever, that we would uphold the Boston Bread Company's agreement for the work that they're doing on that property. Any questions or comments?
They stay in the same footprint that they're in now?
Yes, so we would basically saying that we are in agreement that we will allow you or whoever we turn the lease over to in the future, that they will uphold the agreements as they are in place.
And that is our property type over there.
Yes.
Is Harbor Freight our property?
Is what?
Harbor Freight?
No.
It's not. All right, we have a first and second of that discussion. Any other questions or comments from members of the commission? Not hearing any, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Not hearing any, that is a vote. Thank you. Okay, moving right along to item COM 1223-3. Commissioner Bearwith, I will ask you to read that into the minutes, please.
Alrighty. It's a motion to review, discuss, and approve the branding options in the Cape Cod Gateway Airport Terminal for American Airlines, sponsored by management and may be acted upon.
Okay, do we have a second to that motion?
Second.
Okay, we have a first and a second, now some discussion.
Sure.
Manager Service, would you share with us the background of this, please?
Sure. So American Airlines, as they prepare for their initial operating season, which will start in June of 2024, there are a number of items within the terminal that need to be ready for their arrival, such as branding and the build-out of their office space and boarding space. So this is really the first step at doing that. We have provided them to date with a draft lease that our attorney helped us craft. We've also asked them for a letter of commitment with the form of lease, just to give them the ability while we're negotiating those terms to be able to build out their space. So they have come to us a couple of days ago, they came to us requesting that we look at their signage plan for the terminal. I'm going to go over that with you. Really what I'm asking the commission to agree upon is if we were to have their lease in place, there would be an item within that lease that says that the commission approves of all leasehold improvements. This is a leasehold improvement that we're asking the commission to approve upon. So really, there are three options, options A, B, and C. Option A, B, and C relatively are the same for the counter space, so this just happens to be option A that's open right now. Option A, B, and C, like I said, are relatively the same. The sign would be the same size as the signs that are there now. It would sit off the wall by about a half an inch. They all have a backer board, and then they have the logo either protruding from the sign or it's PVC and acrylic and vinyl graphics that are on top of the sign. So you can see in this graphic here where it just protrudes by about a half inch off of the wall. This is the wall that they're showing here. This is what it would look like in place in front of this. These are the counters that they'll be renting from us. This is what it would look like in place of that counter. Like I said, options A, B, and C are relatively the same. Where it differs is once you get into the gate area. So this is what I'd like to show you. So this is just option A. Once you get into the gate area, both option A shows a wrapping of the windows with American Airlines logo. I'll go over that in a couple of moments and give you my suggestions for what I think we should do. But that's what that would look like. They did not superimpose the podium in here, but I'll show you what that looks like in the next slides. Going on to option B, you can see it's relatively the same. What they do show in option B is that they would have a display, a digital display, which is consistent with what Cape Air has and what JetBlue has, so that would be something that they would be installing. Again, right in front of their counter space. This is just some more detail of how the graphics would look. Again, PVC vinyl graphics is what they're
It's not electrified or neon?
It's not electrified, none of them are. So it just gives more detail. These are 3 different companies that they went to provide them with estimates. But here's a graphic that shows the gate space with the podium that they have here. That would be the same size in all 3 options. With a totem that they would have that would say American Airlines main boarding. On the flip side it says welcome to Cape Cod. And then they show a wrap on the windows. This is option B. Moving to option C, again, counter, same, relatively the same. But as you move into option C and you go into the TSA checkpoint area, now they have the same size podium, they have their totem, and then they have their digital display, but now it's in front of that window. My suggestion, preferred suggestion, is I like the small podium with the totem without wrapping, but I don't like this version because I think it blocks the window. I would prefer to see it off to the side without window wrapping, because Cape Air also uses this gate. JetBlue might have the opportunity to use the gate. This is not American Airlines gate,
Right.
This is just the station that they would be located at.
Right.
I don't think it's appropriate to put their name on the gate. They can at their podium and at the totem, but I don't think a wrap is appropriate. Now, they do show us some different wraps, which this is what they've done at other airports that have a scene of some type of local scene that they have at the facility. They could do this, but I still, again, I'm uncomfortable with having the name American Airline on a gate that multiple airlines will
Looks like
use.
Grand Plimpton in Tucson.
It might be.
It is.
Okay. I personally would rather see that it not have anything in front of it. And then the podium and the signs be off to the side so that it's not claiming that gate for their own. That's my suggestion. And I can flip back to those.
And what about the screen above it, Katie?
The screen above it would be their screen, would be their digital display. Again, I kind of like it off of the vestibule. So,
So Katie, I would suggest that we do nothing more than what we've done for Cape Air and JetBlue, so that we have consistency in terms of our policy. At the same time, even though American has requested this, would this jeopardize our relationship with them in any way?
with American, no, they just said, what would your commission like us to do?
Okay.
So I, this is an alternative view on that, and I appreciate the concern there. If Cape Air doesn't have a monitor, right?
Cape Air does, in the checkpoint and in the gate area, they do not have a podium, nor do they have a monitor.
Right.
They
If they wanted.
If they could, they certainly could.
So our policy needs to be consistent, but it's at the election of the company as to whether or not they want to put that stuff up there, and I wouldn't want to restrict American because Cape Air or
JetBlue.
JetBlue doesn't wanna do that.
And JetBlue has
Doesn't
on the
JetBlue
other
have it?
side, they do
Yeah.
have, it's a bigger podium that they have on the other side. But again, they don't have any wrapping around that window.
Right.
They just happen to use
Right.
that gate all the time.
No, I agree with you, the American Airlines wrap on the window in any form is not appropriate because it's not their gate. However, go back to that lighthouse. It's our window, right?
We could do our
Yeah.
own wrapping if we wanted.
Yeah, without the American Airlines
Yeah.
thing on it.
I mean,
I
we
think that
could
really
do
looks
that.
cool.
It does
Yeah.
look nice.
Yeah.
And I think they showed another one where it was wrapped around the side. Let me just look at these graphics. It might be the next one.
Well, if you're going to put Nantucket, they may should put something with a vivid. And I
Yeah,
guess.
got it.
So there's equal opportunity.
So we're gonna go
Block
with
the
no
view.
wrapping.
If we're gonna block the view, let's have equal opportunity.
So here's the wrapping just in the front of the vestibule, and then on this side, this is the side view. It
Yeah.
does look pretty,
It does,
But,
and it's themed,
yeah,
it's a Cape Cod theme.
Yeah.
I think that it has some marketing value,
yeah. I mean, we could definitely look at that.
yeah.
But for American Airlines purposes,
Right.
is it safe to say that we would be interested in B, option B, without the wrapping on the window?
Yes,
Without
Yes.
yes.
The
Okay,
answer is yes.
all right. My job's done
While we're
here.
talking about signage, have we ever brought the request for signage on the tower to say Cape Cod Gateway Airport to any level of?
No, I have not advanced that, it's on my to-do list, but yes, we can do it.
Could you give us a report at the next meeting?
Sure,
Who owns the tower?
we do,
We do,
yes,
okay.
so we can do
What I
that.
suggested a while back from a distance, I mean, it just looks like
Yes,
this
we do.
Yeah.
column, it should have Cape Cod Gateway Airport.
Right.
Especially coming from the south side, it'd be a beautiful image of it.
Yeah, sure, yeah.
So
Okay.
I think we do need to vote on this,
Yes,
okay.
this is item COM 1223-3. We have a first and second discussion. Any other comments or questions from members of the commission? Not hearing any. Then it's time to vote on this. All those in favor of this signify by saying
Well,
aye.
hold on a second.
Yes,
It says to review, discuss, and approve the branding options. Can we specify?
Thank you, that's
we're
what I was just
approving.
gonna say.
Option B.
May I suggest the language B? Option B, podium, gate display monitor, and totem placement without the window wrapping.
Yes, I like that. I think that captures it.
okay,
Is that good, John?
it works for me.
Okay.
So we will vote COM 1223-3 to review and approve the branding option as just described by manager service. Could you describe that one more time? Just
Sure.
to be sure we're on the same page.
It is option B, podium, gate display monitor, and totem placement without window wrapping in the TSA gate area.
Okay,
Yeah.
with that being said, any other questions or comments from anyone? Okay, not hearing any, we can take this vote now. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No,
Okay, that
it
is
says
a vote.
option B.
Okay, thank you all. Moving on to item number 10, which is report of special committees. Noise report for July, October, January, April. Are we prepared to give that today?
We don't have anything for
Okay.
noise.
Okay, next then would be the Yarmouth representative comments. Commissioner Chris Greeley, have you any comments that you would like to make?
No, other than I do know that the town of Yarmouth does have a consultant they've hired, and there are plans to submit various comments and concerns about the master plan.
Yes.
Good to know. Okay, then we will move on to updates, beginning with the monthly financial review and then followed in accordance to what is on our agenda. Manager Service, would you be so kind as to run through these, but not looking towards fiscal '29?
Yes, I will try to be quick on this. So this is the budget summary that I provided to the finance subcommittee. I'm looking for a slideshow, there we go. So this was provided to the subcommittee. It's an overview of where we are on the budget. This is a longer presentation in terms of, I will shorten this, but longer presentation in terms of we've been asked quarterly to provide some more detailed information, especially in regards to where we are in the jet fuel cost center. So in looking at our revenues of where we are, this is as of November 29th, 2023. So for our jet fuel purchases, our budget is 7.3 million. Actual at that point in time in November was just over 4.1 million that we've spent. That we've made in revenues for jet fuel. Rental car concessions, they're doing quite well. Obviously, we're within 6 months of our fiscal year, and we're already, close to meeting our budget for our rental car concessions. I anticipate that going up even more when we have American Airlines that comes in for those types of concessions that we receive.
Is there one car rental company that's doing better than the others?
Yes, and I'll show you that in a couple of slides. Land leases for both aviation and non-aviation, they're tracking as appropriately as they should within 6 months of this fiscal year. And those are based on our leases. And then we do have some CARES Act money and TSA grants that we received. Our TSA grant that we receive helps us pay for the police officer that's here during screening flights. It doesn't pay for all of it, but it does help. It fluctuates from year to year as to how much we will get from that grant. But we were in receipt by the end of November, $14,400.
So that does not come out of the police budget, that comes out of our budget.
Yes, we pay for the police detail that's here.
Are we required to do that by law?
Yes, we're required to do that according to our airport security plan, that we would have a police officer here to do those screenings. CARES Act grants, we did receive some reimbursement from the projects that we have in play right now. We should be closing those projects out soon for CARES Act as well. Okay. Other revenue that's come in, renewable energy. We've seen some increases in our 20-acre solar array that's out there on the airfield over this past year. I know in previous years, we've had some parts of the solar array that had been down for problems that they've had with that particular system. We had an awful lot of rain this year, so it surprises me that we're up at that 595,000 collected thus far. 545,000. When we put in our budget, the renewable energy, we put what the guaranteed dollar amount will be that was identified for each of the fiscal years within our 20-year program. So sometimes we come out a little bit higher, sometimes we're right at that level, but it's nice to see that we've increased it thus far within the first 6 months of this fiscal year. Our total revenues, without taking into account the grants that we have in place, are about 6.8. In the next couple of slides, you'll see what it is overall with our expenses. And total revenues with those CARES Act and bill grants that are coming in, just over 8 million. Budget summary revenue, these are our top 6 revenue producers. In a couple of slides, you will see when we drill in a little bit more to the jet fuel cost center, that changes, that really we look at that a little bit differently. So right now we have jet fuel, that's our top revenue producer. A couple of slides from now, you'll see that it's number 2 on our list, with our land leases being higher. Looking at our budget summary for expenses, salaries and wages are typically our highest expenses throughout the year. We have been spending more money on overtime wages because we still have a really hard time getting a custodian in. Matt's been trying for over 2 years, and we have hired some people. They've moved up in the organization, which is great. But even for those that we've offered jobs to, they haven't showed up. And we had good reviews for them. It's been very difficult, not only for us, across the board. The town of Barnstable is having a hard time getting staff in for jobs such as these or laborers' positions. Looking at our operating expenses, jet fuel purchases for resale, you'll see a little bit more detail on that in a few moments, but so far into November, about 3.1 million is what we spent in this fiscal year.
Katie, does the new split on the medical insurance take effect with FY25?
No, it is supposed to take effect on July 1 of 2024. It's still upheld right now in union discussions with various, not just the union that's here, other unions that are across the town.
Right, but if the town approves that and we approve it, then it
July
has to be
1.
built into the budget.
Yes.
And we've taken that into account.
I think there'll be an adjustment that we'll see, across the board, but I think what we'll probably end up seeing is more people that are not part of the healthcare program may transition to this, because now it's a 70-30 split.
That's a big split.
So
Yeah.
we might see, and that's to be anticipated,
Okay.
so we might see that.
Thank you.
Katie, reference the janitorial issue. Have we looked at getting a contract?
We did talk about that, so that's a good point. We have 19 positions within the Teamsters Union that are protected positions that we have within, and that includes 2 full-time custodial positions. We would have to look at that to see how that could be modified in the future if we were to go in that direction. It's plausible it might come to a point where we have to go in that direction if we're still having a hard time fulfilling the positions. We're even looking for another custodian to bring on so that we have 3 full-time custodians, because when you start looking at American Airlines and now we have a fixed base operation that has a much nicer space, to be able to have a custodian that can operate more within a shift work environment and include those spaces, we're gonna need a 3rd person, but we're still having a hard time finding people.
If we wanted to privatize that whole aspect of airport operations, it's even with the current employees who are members of the Teamsters Union, we could still negotiate that.
We could.
Yes.
We could. We probably wouldn't negotiate it right now as part of this one, but we could negotiate it in the future.
When you say that the janitorial positions, the 2 janitorial positions are protected union positions, what do you mean by that?
So there's 19 positions within the union contract that are full-time positions that have been identified as, I say protected, maybe that's not the correct word to use, but are the positions that we recognize within the union that are
Right.
full-time positions.
Right.
So there are 19, we can add more to that.
Sure.
Obviously, they wouldn't wanna see us remove any of those positions. I think that would be a negotiating point or a discussion point that we'd have to have with the union in the future if that were the case.
But we could contract out the janitorial services and not touch those positions, we just leave them vacant.
I think that's a further discussion that we'd have to have, yeah. And I'd probably wanna do that if we're talking about negotiation of a union
Sure.
contract in executive.
Yeah, okay,
Absolutely.
thank you.
In regards to our surplus, this is without the grants, about 1.4 is where we sit right now, as of the end of November, and with those grants, about 2.5 million. Again, top 6 expenses that we have on the books, obviously purchases for resale for jet fuel, and then it dips into our salaries, our liability insurance, etc. When we look further into the jet fuel, when we look at jet fuel revenue, this is a fiscal year comparison of revenue collected from one fiscal year to the next. So we're down about 19% as of the end of November. We collected just over 5 million in fiscal year 2023 versus 4.1 roughly in fiscal year 2024. Almost $1 million difference between one fiscal year to the next. There are differences in the jet fuel price that we're seeing, but there's also differences in how much fuel we're actually selling as well. So if you look at the comparison for the fiscal year again, for gallons sold in 2023 versus 2024, we're down by about 2.5%. 2023, we sold just over 924,000 gallons, and in 2024, same time frame, 901,000 gallons.
It's interesting that a 2.5% reduction in the number of gallons sold equates to a 19% reduction in the funding. That doesn't seem to line up.
I can look at those numbers again,
Yeah.
but I can definitely look at those numbers again. When we look at the gallons sold just for the month of November, from one fiscal year to the next, it's an increase of 1.3% is what we're seeing. 89,000, just over 89,000 gallons sold last year versus 90,000 this year. I'll take a look at these two
Those two, yeah.
splits again and get back to
There's
you.
a direct relationship between those two.
When we look at the graphs for annual jet fuel sales sold, obviously we know that in 2021, 2022, 2022, 2023, we saw peaks. Obviously, a lot of that had to do with COVID. I have another slide that explains kind of what we're starting to see going into this fiscal year and next year. This is where we sit as of the end of November, but again, that's a partial fiscal year, so that's why you're seeing that downturn. When we look month over month, obviously our highest months are July, August, September, June, July, August, September. So the valley that you see here is our typical, what we like to call the doldrums of the Cape, when it gets a little bit quiet over here, but we're still selling fuel on a regular basis. This is where we are right now to date, and we're just tracking in alignment with where we have been previously in previous months. Business outlook. So I did this last time. I looked at where we were from a jet usage outlook of where the industry sees themselves. So when we were looking at this back in May of 2023, this is when we provided the additional financial information for the jet fuel cost center. We saw a dip in business aviation operations, but that seems to be improving, but in very small increments from what we can gather. So the global business aviation flight activity has remained stable. So for the month of November, it's up by a very small amount, 0.4% from over 2022 and 2024, when we look at those. Activity overall has declined, and we've seen that in the number of operations in general. Month over month they declined, but there are some areas where we've noted increases versus a decrease. So fractional flying right now is up about 16% from a year ago. And we've seen that in some of the news media that's been out there about fractional flying. We've even seen it in some companies like NetJets purchasing more aircraft to add to their fleet. Part 135 activity dropped by about 8.7%, and then Part 191 activity overall was up by 1.5%. So we're not seeing those huge increases like we saw during COVID, but their projections for 2024 is that we're still going to see a rise in business travel overall. Even though there are declines, there's economic downturns, we're not sure what's going to happen with worldwide instability that we're seeing, but overall businesses are saying that they need to continue their business relationships now, so they see that business travel overall will be increasing.
Katie, before you move on to slides, for the sake of our audience and for my own sake, redefine Part 135 and Part 91.
So charter activities versus private pilot flying an aircraft.
91 is general aviation.
Yep.
So 130, what's going on with 135? Has there been a reduction in operations with Cape Air or?
Cape Air has seen a reduction in operations. I think the types of activity that you're seeing 135 operators operate are seeing the pilot shortage that's also affecting them. So when you think about, our hometown Cape Air, that's affecting them, you can see that affecting them. But then you look at other Part 135 operators that maybe are not necessarily associated with the business jet activity, but we're still seeing overall a decline in those operators.
Can I ask what fractional flying is?
So fractional flying is when multiple entities buy into one aircraft. So you might have 5 companies or 5 families that buy into an aircraft.
Okay, thank you.
Excuse me, we had also asked before, excuse me, to get the monthly traffic count reports so we could monitor traffic activity. We haven't seen those.
Yes, we do provide those, but I have them here too. But you should be getting them monthly as well.
I haven't seen any.
Okay, look, we'll make sure that you have the attachment.
Thank you.
So this is the rental car concession. This is today kind of where we are. Where we are today at 300, I think that says 337,000. Sorry, my eyesight. That's kind of in alignment where we've kind of been in the past. So this is fiscal year 14 through fiscal year 2024. But we know that we're going to see an increase. We've done well in the past 2 previous years. Whenever I do the budget though, I stay more consistent to our average that we've seen because there are dips and flows in what we see happen here with the rental car companies, but they have been doing quite well. When you look overall, to answer John's question about the overall company that is the most active at the airfield, typically in the green is Hertz. very often Hertz is the top over the past several years. 2014, this is fiscal year 2014 through 2024. You either see Hertz or Enterprise that are, selling the most amount of vehicles here on the airfield. So again, Hertz has typically been the highest revenue producer, but this month we saw Enterprise and Avis kind of leap ahead of them. They had very strong months in August, with Enterprise selling over, or the concession was over 37,000, and the 31,000 for Avis as well. So
Yeah,
those are strong August months.
They're all independent companies, one doesn't own all the others, correct?
Yeah, they're all independent companies, but they also have code agreements with other companies. So if you go out and look at their signs, you'll see
Right.
that Enterprise has multiple branding on their signs.
Enterprise owns National and
Right,
Alamo.
that's, yeah.
Yeah.
But they're all separate, right?
Yes,
Yes.
these are all separate. Operations and passengers activity, so actual, so this is through the end of November for our passenger activity. 23,000 was the passenger activity. Obviously, when we start picking up again in May through September, we'll see that activity change. With American Airlines, we're going to see hopefully an increase in this area. We're looking and predicting about 40,000 within the overall estimate for total passengers, and half the year or half the fiscal year we're at about 23,000, just over 23,000. What I need to mention here is that only includes our passenger activity that comes through the terminal. It does not include the passengers that are flying on private aircraft that are going to Griffin Avionics or Atlantic or to Aloft. It doesn't include the number of passengers that are boarding every single day on Gull Air or through Marine Lumber to send employees over to the islands. It doesn't account for those.
Do we know what those numbers are?
We do, we have those numbers, we can start adding them.
Could we add those in?
But to what effect? I mean, as far as
It's
the
just the
FAA
number of
is,
folks going through this airport, I
Yeah.
mean, we can subdivide it, I'd like to see what the total is.
Sure.
to the FAA though, that doesn't do us, and we can't count them, it doesn't,
It
us any-
doesn't, but I think from an activity standpoint,
yeah.
a throughput.
For our own public relations here at the airport, in terms of what the public sees, in terms of traffic coming through. I'm not trying to pad the numbers, I just want to show the difference, that above and beyond paying customers that come through on a commercial airline, there are other entities that have their own planes, for example, I'm thinking of
CBS.
the hardware store over on
Marine
Marine Lumber,
Lumber.
thank you.
Yeah.
That was my, Marine Lumber flies.
1,200
Yeah.
a year.
Right.
The only areas that we might have some sticking point is maybe through Atlantic or Aloft Aviation, they might not have their passenger numbers that they would be sharing with us, but we can find
If we
out.
can.
Yep.
I want to have this. Is Gull Airline flying passengers yet, or will they be?
They
they just
are,
doing freight?
but they're doing it, it's not charter, it is a charter flight, but it's limited.
Right.
Limited charter to, I believe it's 5 operations a week that they're limited to.
And they're
But-
flying Cessna 402s?
They are, and they're flying electricians and plumbers and, your contractors over to the islands early in the morning and then coming back in the afternoon.
So technically they're paying somebody's paying that,
Yes.
right?
That's my point.
Yeah, yeah.
For operations, again, this goes back to still being down, but we have to think about the type of aircraft that are coming in here as well. We have reduced loads for Cape Air. So we know that, I'll go to the next slide because it's easier. We know that we've seen this decline over the years in regards to passenger activity at the airport. We're hoping to bring that back up with, obviously American Airlines and other airlines operating at the facility.
Kate, when we see a storm come in and the wind obviously stops the hourly boat going out of Hyannis, do people race over here to see if they can jump on a plane?
Yeah. Oftentimes they do to see if there's availability. I know even speaking to some of the commissioners in the past, they've done that in the past to get over to the islands. That is typical that you'll see that happen. We so happened yesterday to be, all Cape Air flights were canceled because of the high winds, which is understandable for the type of aircraft that they fly.
Hey, the ground stop Boston.
Yeah.
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 I saw that.
Katie, can you go back 2 slides? So that 19,451, that's only through October, correct?
Yes.
So that's 4 months out of the year, which is a third. If you multiply that by 3, we're pretty close to the 60,000 budget.
We are, I'd just like.
I know, we'd like to see it a little bit stronger.
We'd like to see it stronger.
Yeah.
You know, to start seeing this go in the opposite direction from what it has been in
I
the
know.
past,
Yeah.
would be great to see.
Yeah.
Um,
On that line, I'm sorry,
yeah,
do we have landing fees here
we do. We
for
do.
general aviation?
We do, not under 12,500 pounds, but above 12,500, yes.
What's the landing fee?
You have to ask me that, I don't know it off the top of my head. It's per 1,000 pounds, but I'd have to look at it. I can send it to you.
I'm wondering whether we should take a look at maybe doing a temporary waiver of the landing fees for, let's say, a 3 or 6 month period and see if that affects the number of operations.
Give them an incentive.
I think if we can go through a rates and charges review and start and look at that, and we'd obviously start with the finance subcommittee and bring it to the full commission, that can be an item that we add to it. Okay. This is just operations and passengers activity. This is airline passenger activity per month, where we see our peaks. So obviously you're seeing June, July, August, a little bit of September, into October being our peak months. When we look at the discussion that we had about diversification of revenue, we started to look a little bit more deeper at our top 6 revenue producers. What you see on the left-hand side, that table is the fiscal year 2023 average top 6. If we just use our straight line accounting, where we have jet fuel that we purchase, jet fuel that we sell. So jet fuel year over year is typically on the top number 1, just looking at it in the raw information, the raw accounting that we're looking at today. The bottom items here, rental car concessions, those fluctuate depending on year after year. So every month when we look at this, your top 6 can be a little bit different, but on average, this is what you're typically seeing. Jet fuel, grants that we have coming in, non-aviation land leases that we have, that includes WS development, rental car concessions, or the revenue from renewable energy credits is usually up there on the top 6. So in looking at when our books closed in fiscal year 2023, our revenues were just over 17 million. That included grants that we received to the airport. So this table here is aviation, is your green text to the right. These are all aviation revenue producers. The black text to the right is non-aviation revenue producers. So if looking at just that green text, that's just over 58% or just over $10 million aviation related revenue, non-aviation just over 7.3. So again, this federal grants are included in this overall dollar amount, the 17 million that you see here. Let me go to the next slide. When you look at this, again, same information, fiscal year 2023, 17 million, includes the grants that we received. It has the aviation and non-aviation revenue producers here. But if we consider the jet fuel cost center, and we consider the cost of goods sold, that's the lower left here, if we consider that, it fluctuates annually, but the components that we've added to this are what we pay out to enable us to sell jet fuel. So it includes our staff salary and wages, the benefits from our that go to our staff, the jet fuel purchases for resale, what we pay for our lease truck payments, insurance, et cetera, et cetera. This was developed by McFarland Johnson when we did the rates and charges study back in 2018. And they did it in such a way that we were able to, each year in our fiscal year when we close the books, we can incorporate the new information to spit out the detail of what we have for different cost centers. It also identifies our employees that we have in the airport, what percentage are they dedicated to each cost center. So obviously our folks in airport operations, they have a high percentage in the cost center for jet fuel. So that's what's accounted for here. When we look at that, the average net is anywhere from 1 million to 1.5 million. For fiscal year 2023, when we closed the books, our average net for jet fuel sales was 1.4 million, just over 1.4. Now what does that do to our diversification of our revenue? When we look at our top 6 revenue producers, taking out of that mix the jet fuel that we're buying for retail, putting in a more true accounting of what we're doing here at the airport. If we remove the grants from that mix, and obviously we reduce the jet fuel to net only, we're looking at our land leases of non-aviation, that includes WS Development, the land leases to Steamship for parking and other parking entities, to be the highest revenue producer, with jet fuel coming in as a close second to that being the highest of our revenue generators. Renewable energy, car rental concessions, land leases for aviation, and landing fees are right up there. So Mark, to your point, when you talk about landing fees, we're nearly $500,000 is what we're making in landing fees for various. So we will need to look at that, but note here that it is one of our top 6 as well.
Yeah, and maybe not go too deep into reviewing or changing what your landing fees are. If you did a 3 or 6 month waiver on it, so there's no landing fee.
An incentive.
An incentive.
Yeah.
And see if it has an effect. If it doesn't have an effect,
Yeah.
there's no point in doing anything. But
Yeah.
if you start seeing an increase in activity, then you want to start taking a look at the landing fees and see what we can do about scaling it back.
Okay.
And there may be an offset, because if you can get the activity,
Then you still.
you might start picking up revenue somewhere else.
Yeah. Yep, that's a good point. So, we'll continue to look at diversification. Obviously, in looking at this, the whole point of this exercise was to say, do we have the right mix of revenue coming into the airport? Do we need to look at other ways that we can diversify our revenue so that we're providing for ourselves if there were, something to happen in the aviation sector or the retail sector? Right now with WS Development, we have a healthy lease that we have with them, but retail could change. So, we need to be prepared for that. So, looking at, like you said, John, the cafe lease, looking at other parcels of property that we have that we could lease out. We have a number of leases that are out there for vehicle parking. Some of them use old, outdated language that we could probably improve upon. Vehicle rentals, all companies are up for renewal at the end of June of next year. We can have more robust airport advertisement around the airfield and within the terminal. And then looking at our 10 acres of hangar development for the aviation sector and continuing down that path. Any comments or questions? This is just an update that we've provided to you time and time again on where we are on some of our grants. We're closing out a lot of those CARES Act and additional grants. So we've closed out 2 of them well before the funds were to expire, which is great. That's the CURSA and the ARPA grant. The CARES Act grant, we will be closing that out soon. That involved the Mary Dunn Way project plus the airport operations and the new hangar. So that we're almost at the end of those projects, so we'll be closing that out as well. And then we're stepping into the bill grants, which is a 5-year program. Year one, we're using it for the environmental assessment, and as I mentioned earlier, HVAC for years 2 and 3. And then year 3 or 4 and beyond, probably for the terminal build out is what we'd be using it for.
Good.
Any questions or comments?
Oh, good job.
Okay. In regards to the future workshop for the strategic plan, I say business plan, I should say strategic plan. We need to get back to that and actually decide when we're gonna have that ad hoc meeting. I did receive the proposal by Pierce Cote for that, and I'd like to discuss it with the ad hoc committee.
Okay.
So Mark, I think you and Norm and John Flores were part of that ad hoc committee, so we just need to discuss when we want our first meeting.
Yeah, so, and one housekeeping step I think that we may have skipped over is we need to designate a chairman of that subcommittee, which I don't think we've done.
No, we haven't done that, so I don't know if, John, you want to do that here, or do you want to?
We don't have to do that here at a public meeting, that really would be
Internal
we have a
commission.
discussion. Why don't we have the discussion either face to face or we can do a Zoom meeting,
Okay,
and at that particular meeting we'll nominate a
All right.
chairperson of that subcommittee.
if you.
Once you give us the information.
Yes, Okay.
Because right now, we're all running blind on this.
All right, we'll establish the first meeting, I'll send you the proposal and
Okay.
then we can discuss from there.
Okay. We'll have a discussion as the first item on the agenda, and then item number 2 will be to nominate a chairperson of the
Okay?
subcommittee, and he or she will, I guess he, will honcho that for us going forward.
Okay, sounds good. I'll try to run through these quick. American Airlines update, just they have, I sent you the draft lease that they have that we're working through with our attorneys and them right now. So that has not been officially put on the agenda yet, but I did send it in advance with the proposals for the branding and the signage in the terminal. Again, we're still going through and coordinating with our attorney, and they need to provide us with their feedback as well. Electric aviation, that hasn't really changed since we initially discussed it, so unless you have questions, I'll skip over that. Okay, WS Development, you may have seen that they've installed their stairs that connect the WS campus to the airport
I
campus.
noticed that.
That's what I like to call it, the airport campus. But they took the cover off of those today, so they're just, it looks like they're getting ready to do some finishing work, which is great that they got that done. So just a reminder, we have Floor & Decor, Whole Foods that will be there, Panera that will be there. They're looking for a restaurant to put at the end cap where Cardi's was, and they're having some difficulty finding a restaurant that wants to move into that space.
That's
and
not Whole
fill it up
Foods?
there. No, Whole Foods is right next to that.
I thought Whole Foods all the way to the end.
No.
And I thought Whole Foods was gonna actually have the restaurant.
Whole Foods is going to have a cafe in front of their walkway,
Oh,
but the end cap also has a green space near
Right,
it, and they
remember
want to
that.
be able to put tables up there for the restaurant.
I thought the cafe was
No,
the restaurant.
no. So if you know anyone, they're looking for it.
Okay, and also in between,
In a town full
to
of
the
restaurants.
left of Floor & Decor, or to the right, what, do we know what's going there?
So they are speaking, they haven't told me who yet, but they are speaking to another entity that wants to rent out the other 50% of the old Kmart Plaza.
So is that to the right?
That's to the right of,
So that would be the end,
no, that's to the left.
to the left.
Floor & Decor is to the right because you can see them building out on that
Okay.
corner.
So the pickleball hasn't been determined yet?
No, it hasn't. But it'd be muffled in there.
Yeah, for sure.
Do you want to hear any updates on the projects from Chris?
Sure.
Chris?
I'll be very brief. We'll start off with runway 624. We're in closeout of that project. I have some not too rough numbers. I show on construction we're $600,000 under budget on construction for the runway job and $30,000 under budget for engineering.
Nice.
We'll have some closeout items in the spring that we'll have to do with some a little bit of pavement and a little bit of paint markings. Next project is EMAS. It is in closeout. I show that project to be $128,000 under budget for construction and $56,000 under budget for engineering. Next, we can jump into the FBO space. That has been, it is in closeout. It is being occupied by our staff. Between the FBO and the T-hanger, I show both of those projects to be under budget by about $130,000. And then next is Mary Dunn Way. Mary Dunn Way, final punch list items have been complete and we're in closeout for that as well. And I show that project to be $160,000 under budget. Those numbers are still a little rough. I don't have final invoices, but I'd rather be on this side than the other side. Any questions?
Just a comment,
Sir.
when you total up all these amounts as close to $1 million, is that money that's built into our budget now, or is that what if money?
So that was built into what we requested of the grant. So, for instance, Mary Dunn Way project, if we don't utilize all of that, the money will go back to the FAA.
Doesn't come to, so, okay.
So we're trying to
I'm trying
utilize
to get $1
that.
million in that.
We are trying to utilize that because we do have projects that, for instance, gates. Our gates in that area, and Chris and I haven't talked about, we've talked about this before, but we haven't recently spoken about it. We had manual gates and we're talking about putting electric slide gates in instead. We wanted electric slide gates, but we pulled back on that. So now's the opportunity to go after that if we can get that as a change order.
Can we get the sign on the tower for this?
Huh? No.
It's
Different
a
project.
little bit of scope creep.
We don't
Different
get that
project.
soon, John's gonna show up with a
I know, right? I know.
grappling hook and a can of spray paint.
Who we are.
I agree.
It's good advertising.
Yeah, no, I agree.
And there's some other areas and other projects we try to utilize that funds. On the runway project, there may be something we can do. There are some other areas that we might be able to capture that money and not give it all back. We just want to give an update where we stand financially.
Right.
Any questions on any of the projects?
I just want to know, did we do the tour of the FBO or?
No,
did I
we
miss-
haven't.
Okay, we haven't?
We haven't.
Have you ever done a tour of the tower?
For the commission, we've done it, not for the commission, but we've done it for other tours that we just
For
had.
the commission, I mean.
We can certainly do that, we can schedule that,
Let's do that, let's schedule a tour of the tower,
okay?
all the new facilities, make it a morning kind of event.
I was just
couple
gonna say,
hours.
can we do it in the morning
Yeah.
and, or something like
Sure.
that, and then maybe finish with lunch or
Drink a
something
cup of
like that.
coffee and we'll.
Yeah.
Let's do it.
I
Yep,
think
let's
that's
do that.
important that we all get our arms around what's been done in
Yeah.
the different locations, and hopefully everybody can make it, so put some dates out.
Yep, we'll put out a couple of dates that.
Do that after the first of the year.
Sure.
Okay, thank you, great reports, I think we're in relatively good shape, so at this point I'll move to item number 11, which is announcements from any of our commissioners. Does anyone have anything they would like to add to today's meeting?
I would just like to make a comment if I may. Katie, you and your team have been, have received some, what I would consider hostile communication about the environmental issues that we're properly dealing with. And while I certainly understand the frustration of folks in dealing with this process, I feel like some of the communication has been inappropriately hostile towards you, because this is not your process. You don't have control over it. You're dealing with what regulations require. And I would like to commend you for the way you responded. You responded professionally, and even keel, provided excellent information. And I think that goes a long way in helping us steer through what's a challenging issue for the public to deal with.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Dion. I would second that. I mean, it seems that some of the meetings that I've attended, as well as other commissioners, there's been more emotion on the floor than there has been objectivity. And I do commend Katie and her staff for the objectivity, if you will. Sort of just the facts, man, or what really amounts to the information that we are required to give. So I think on behalf of the commission, job well done.
Thank you.
Okay, anybody else? Okay, with that being said, the only other announcement I would make before we do adjourn is to wish everyone a wonderful, happy holiday season, whatever you happen to celebrate, a Merry Christmas, a Happy New Year, or a most recent Happy Hanukkah, or a future Happy Kwanzaa, whatever you're into.
You forgot
Just
Boxing
wishing you-
Day.
I'm sorry?
You forgot Boxing Day, man.
That was
Boxing Day.
Canadian.
Thank you very much.
Having lived there for 17 years.
Exactly. And my executive assistant was Canadian, so she
Yeah.
would remind me every year.
There you go.
about that.
I'm glad you
And Happy
helped.
Boxing Day.
Boxing Day.
That's the week after Christmas, I believe. At any rate, wishing everybody to have a great, happy holiday season, and hoping that calendar year 24 goes as well as calendar year 23 does, at least for the majority of us, as well as the airport. And with that being said, item number 12 is matters not reasonably anticipated by the chair. I don't have any. I wish all of those who are not here today good health and quick recovery. And finally, item number 13, which is the adjournment. I would take a motion to bring this meeting to adjournment at, it looks like 5:43 PM.
So moved.
Motion to adjourn.
All right, it's been motion set. All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. And we will see everybody for our next meeting, which is January 16th, 2024 at 4 PM Tuesday, and that will be here at the airport conference room.
That will be
No,
Zoom.
online, Zoom.
Oh, that's right, yes, we're going to Zoom,
Yes.
I stand corrected. So for the sake of our audience,
Until when?
in January of 2024, which in this case will be the 16th, at 4 PM, we will be going on Zoom, and we'll send out the appropriate information for anybody who might want to join us. With that being said, thanks, everybody.
Thank you.